Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending our Simple Numbers webinar series featuring our friends and colleagues from CEO Think Tank. My name is Mike Maxon, and I am a business development executive here at Carr, Riggs & Ingram and member of our Simple Numbers consulting team. Before getting started, I wanted to send our thoughts and prayers to those affected by the tornadoes in Nashville. Very heartbreaking, and we hope for a speedy recovery for all those involved. You might recall that back in August, we did our first episode featuring Leah Shalabad of Intex Solutions, and she provided us with great information regarding the ever-growing cybersecurity threat businesses face. And so going forward, you can expect more of these webinars as we feel it's important to share content, especially when it's from very successful and trusted partners that we have access to here at Carr Riggs and Simple Numbers. One quick housekeeping item before we get started. If you have any questions, please enter them into the Q&A box and we will get to them at the very end. It's about 45 minutes or so of presentation and then give you 15, 20 minutes of Q&A at the end. If anything is large, they'll be sharing their email addresses and contact information. That way we can maybe get you a deeper answer or more information. With that being said, let's do it. I would like to introduce our Scaling Up certified speakers today. First, Cheryl Beth Kuchler, who is a founder and president of CEO Think Tank with over 30 years of experience. Cheryl Beth partners with small and mid-market CEOs and C-level executives to create more valuable and sustainable companies. Eileen Wainwright has over 25 years of experience in the enterprise and startup space, helping companies transform their strategies into action. And we also have Jill Huentelman on the line, who is founder of the education company for over 20 years and is also certified as a Scaling Up coach. I'll hand it over to them and let's get it started.
Thanks to everyone for joining us today on this webinar. And a very big thank you to Mike Maxon and the team at Crabtree, now Carr, Riggs & Ingram, for hosting and making this educational session possible. We have 3 learning objectives for you today. 1, we'd like you to walk away understanding the 4 critical decisions that you need to make to grow your business profitably. 2, learn about the 3 barriers to growth. And 3, be introduced to a roadmap to scale up, as well as a robust operating system specifically designed to improve your execution, increase your cash flow, and drive top-line growth. And you'll come away with an assessment of your lead domino for growth. This assessment will help you to identify the key decision for you to focus on in the year ahead that will have the greatest impact on your business, as well as a documented roadmap to help you scale profitably. As Mike said, please let us know your questions as we go along, and we will allow time at the end to answer them. So we found that there are 3 areas where CEOs and C-level executives in the small and small mid-market space struggle the most. First, they want to grow profitably, but they don't want to wait and waste time. 2, they have too many competing priorities and aren't clear on which ones are the right ones to focus on in order to create a more robust and valuable business. And 3, they struggle to hold people accountable to their commitments and get them all pulling in the same direction. Our educated guess is that you are struggling with one or more of these challenges, which is why you're listening to this webinar. And those struggles are what we are going to address today to help you begin to address the barriers to growth. So we all know that companies go through different growth stages. And what got you to the place that you are now will not get you to where you're trying to go or want to go in the years ahead. We refer to these stages somewhat humorously as startup, scale up, and screw up. What you might not know, however, is that as your company scales, there are 4 decisions you need to make in order to grow, scale, and thrive profitably and sustainably, they are attracting and keeping and engaging the right people. 2, creating and implementing a truly differentiated strategy that will ensure predictable growth. 3, driving flawless execution. And 4, having plenty of cash to weather the storms and the viruses that might affect you. And that is what Vern Harnish, the author of Scaling Up, calls the 4 decisions framework. So you see, in this very complex world of business, it really comes down to just 4 decisions you need to think about. 4 legs of the table, as it were. And typically what we found is that one of those legs, just like the table in a restaurant that you're sticking sugar packets underneath of, is short. And that's the leg that's getting in the way of your success. So what's your short leg? Because most companies have issues in all 4 areas. And the first decision is which of the 4 decisions you're going to focus on. So to help you figure that one out, we've got some questions for you to think about. Are all of your stakeholders engaged in your business and accountable for your results? Would you enthusiastically rehire all of your employees? Or do you have a partner issue or an employee whose behavior is mucking up the attitudes of the other people on your team? Are you missing a key executive and so you're carrying double the load? Or if you're like a lot of the CEOs with whom we work, you just can't find enough of the right people. If so, you may choose people to focus on first. Are your gross margin dollars growing as fast as you'd like, which means that you have something people want and are willing to pay a good price for, something that you may have heard Greg Crabtree say. If not, you may have a strategy issue. Have you increased your revenues, but your profitability has dropped? Are you spending more hours working and not less as the company has scaled? Then you may have an execution issue. Finally, you can get by with decent people, a strategy, and execution, but not a day without cash. And it's just not about making payroll and paying your vendors. It's about having the cash reserves to take advantage of unforeseen opportunities and deal with challenges. So now that we've got you thinking about your business, let's up the game by taking a quick assessment. So I'm going to pass you off to my Scaling Up colleague, Eileen Wainwright, to take it from here.
Thank you, Cheryl, Beth. Hello, everyone. Quick echo of gratitude for investing time with us today. Before we begin, I just want to let everyone know that you will be receiving a link to this assessment that we're about ready to go through, as well as a copy of the presentation. So there's no pressure in trying to write all the questions that you're going to see on your screen now, because we'll be sending them to you. What's really important for the moment is jotting down your score for each of the questions. So Cheryl Beth shared some clues to help you start thinking about your organizational short leg. And what we're going to do is use the 4 decision assessment, or what we call the 4D assessment, to help you identify that short leg, or at least get you closer to identifying that short leg. So for the next couple of minutes, I'm going to read the 10 statements or the 10 questions, and I want you to rank your company on a scale of 1 to 5 for each of the statements, with 5 meaning that you strongly agree and 1 meaning that you strongly disagree. So please take a few seconds to have a pen and paper in hand so you can follow along and jot down your scores. Okay, so let's get going with the first question. We have a clear sense of our key differentiators and win deals much more often than we lose. Jot down your score. Question number 2. We have a clearly articulated vision, BHAG, written down and understood by our employees, and the goal drives people forward with excitement. Question 3. We gather feedback on an ongoing basis from our customers and employees to improve the company. Question 4. We have the right people in the right seats with key accountabilities and targets defined for success in their jobs. Everyone understands how they will get an A. Question 5. We have core values which we use to attract, hire, and engage our employees, and have created a solid virtual bench of candidates as a result. Take a second for everyone to catch up. Okay, question 6. We have a cash reserve of 2 to 3 months of operating expenses. Question 7. We have plenty of time to plan for the company because we do such little firefighting. Eight, we review our most important metrics daily and weekly to make sure things are running on time and on target. Question 9, or statement 9 rather. We have a written business plan that we use to direct our activities on a weekly basis. And the final statement, we regularly accomplish most of what we set out to accomplish, including hitting or exceeding our targeted numbers. So let's see how you all did. Go ahead and add up the numbers for all 10 statements. If you score 40 to 50, it looks like you're generally doing well, and there may be an opportunity to elevate your performance. If you have a score of 30 to 40, it looks like you're on the right track, but there's room for improvement or opportunity for improvement. And if you have a score less than 30, then you are taking a significant risk with your business. We would definitely recommend that you invest time to better understand why. So how do you know what your short leg is from here? You may have caught on as I was reading the statements to a pattern in the assessment. There were actually 3 questions or 3 statements related to strategy, 2 related to people, 1 related to cash, and 4 execution statements. We've observed that the companies that are the most well-positioned for success, that are growing sustainably, profitably, and predictably, are typically getting 4s and 5s to these questions. If you're not getting 4s or 5s, that might be an indication of your short leg or short legs. So take a moment to write the decision where you scored low or what might be your short leg, along with a couple of notes perhaps about what caused you to rate your organization the way you did. Just giving everybody a moment. Before I hand off to Jill to talk with you about the 3 barriers to growth, let's take a couple of minutes to reflect and dig a little deeper on what may be your short leg. So Cheryl Beth mentioned earlier, these all may be reasons why you have a people short leg. If you've got a lot of yeses here, you may choose people to focus on first. Let's move on to strategy. Strategy may be your short leg if you can't answer yes to these 3 questions. If you're not answering yes, maybe strategy is where you need to focus first. Let's move on to execution. If you can't answer yes to these questions, execution may be your short leg. And finally, cash. On cash, we're looking for no's. So if you can't answer no to these questions, cash may be your short leg. There are times, or actually often, I get, what if I've got a few questions in each decision that are a challenge, right? If they're all equal, what then? And my answer to that is actually in a question. The question that you need to be asking yourself, if all areas of your business remain at the current level of performance, what is the one area where change would have the greatest impact? In other words, what's going to move the needle? So if all decisions are equal and you've got a sprinkling across each one that you were answering, that you couldn't answer yes, or you didn't have a no, it's really trying to find the leading domino. Which of the 4 decisions would be the most impactful if you focused on first? So with that said, let me hand the mic over to my Scaling Up colleague, Jill, to take us through the 3 barriers to growth.
Thanks, Eileen. Appreciate it. Let me go ahead and we'll start talking about the barriers to growth here. And let me just have you think back to when your company was just 2 people. And this startup situation represents 2 channels of communications or degrees of complexity. And anyone in a relationship knows that's hard enough. Just ask my husband. 2 people. And then you have a 3rd person, or a customer, or a location, or a product. And the degree of complexity triples from 2 to 6. Add a 4th, and it quadruples to 24. So expanding from 3 to 4 people grows the team only 33%, yet exponentially it grows your challenges. And the complexity just keeps growing. But understanding what complexities you may face may require you to have what I call a crystal ball. But in absence of a crystal ball, here's one tool that you might find helpful. And you might find this helpful in seeing what lies ahead as your business scales based on the number of employees you have. And it's called the 7 stages of growth. So you can see here, there's a line that has the total number of staff or employees you might have. And then depending on number of employees, it will let you know what stage of growth that you're in. The 7 stages of growth is based on the book, Navigating the Growth Curve. And it's a book by James Fisher, who studied 650 entrepreneurial companies in order to create this model. And among other things, this model identifies the first priority of the organization as the number of employees increase. So for example, if you have a 35-person organization, you are transitioning between a delegation stage and a professional stage, with the number 1 priority would shift from being a people focus to being a process or an execution focus, getting back to the 4 decisions. So if you want the complete chart, visit this website, www.igniteyourbiz.com, and you'll find it there. But this is a very nice tool that helps us understand, as we grow in total number of staff, some of the challenges we might be facing. So let's now talk about the 3 barriers to growth. And there are 3 fundamental barriers to scaling up. The first is leadership. And that is the inability to staff or grow enough leaders throughout the organization who have the capabilities to delegate and to manage. The second barrier to growth is creating what we call scalable infrastructure. So in other words, that's not having the systems and the structures, whether they're physical or organizational, to handle the complexities in communication and decisions that come with growth. The third barrier to growth is what we call market dynamics, which is the failure to address increased competitive pressures that build and can erode your margins as you scale the business. So when you remove these barriers, then that anchor that you feel like you've been dragging around turns into the wind at your back with an engaged and accountable team. And wouldn't we all like that for our businesses? So let me give you some examples of companies that have overcome these barriers. And I'm going to focus on two of the barriers to scaling up. One is market dynamics and one is leadership. So let's talk about market dynamics. In late 2014, right before what turned out to be the worst recession in the oil and gas industry since the 1970s, Joe Hawk and his team at Uniflight, and there's a picture of Joe. Uniflight is a diversified helicopter services company. They were faced with less than $1 million of booked backlog revenue and negative profitability. Given that the helicopter industry is positively correlated with the price of oil, Uniflight, along with many other companies in the space, was hit hard. So they took the following steps to kind of address the turbulent market dynamics. So the first thing they did is they put an emphasis on their strategy, and they put an emphasis on supporting mission critical operations. And that became the driver for their strategic positioning. And what they did was that they delivered to their uniquely tailored solution to their core customer. And that was organizations like police and firefighters who couldn't afford to be without an aircraft, right? So then their purpose became crystal clear, and it enhanced the commitment and provided meaning throughout the organization for all their employees. So the first thing they did is they realized strategy was likely a short leg, and they said, let's focus on that and get really crystal clear of who our core customer is and service them well. The second thing they did is that they focused on a few very clear priorities. So in the first year, they focused on managing cash, and that was owned by the CFO. And then they also drove sales, and that was owned by the CEO. So it was what they called the 1-2 punch around cash. And that helped the team and their employees focus on critical items. It kept them out of the weeds, and it kept them on track with what their priorities were. The third thing that they did is that they focused on flawless execution, and they put the right systems in place to fix quality issues that they had, and they held twice-a-month tactical meetings where everyone on the leadership team reported in on their hits and their misses so that they kept learning from their mistakes and course corrected. The result was that Uniflight went from less than 1 million of booked backlog and negative profitability to, within 2 years, over $10 million of booked backlog and over $15 million in revenue, with over a 5% net profitability. That's a great example of leveraging, using the 4 decisions, understanding what your short leg is, and then given the market dynamics of the worst recession in the oil and gas industry, to turn the ship around and actually thrive. Let's go to a second case study here. And this one, our second example, is about a company that had to address their leadership challenges as their barrier to growth. So PPR is a holding company in the mortgage advisory and fund management space in the United States. It was started in 2007 by 4 partners, and now they have 3 partners who oversaw an opportunity in distressed debt. And as their CEO, Dave Van Horn likes to say, the company was initially run as an investment club. But they did see an opportunity to grow after learning about scaling up. But the first thing they had to do was address their leadership issues. So people was their short leg. And Dave's biggest lesson learned, he freely admits, is the importance of having the right people in the right seats, doing the right things, and understanding how the org chart needed to change and evolve as the company grew, as he was going through those stages of growth. So what did Dave do? Well, the first thing they did is Dave and his partners put in place more accountability, clearly defined scorecards with key performance indicators or KPIs and responsibilities for each role. That was the people part. They also worked on their vision clarity and stayed on top of their plan with quarterly and weekly meetings. So having the right meeting rhythms also helped them execute flawlessly. And then the leadership team also focused on creating a culture rooted in shared core values with a clear purpose that was to share, build, and preserve wealth. And that was the strategy piece that they got crystal clear on. So not just by helping the homeowner, but also by leaving everyone in the communities in which they work a better place. So the bottom line was not only did the partners get serious about the business over the past 5 years, but they've more than tripled the company's top line, and heading into 2020, they're well on their way to over $65 million in revenue. Again, it's leveraging the 4 critical decisions, understanding what their short leg is, and then being able to act on it in a very efficient, precise, and consistent manner. And the results speak for themselves. So, as you can imagine, none of these things happened overnight. And no 2 companies are the same. So with the barriers to growth and the 4 decisions, everyone's different. So that's why we wanted to come up with a scaling up roadmap to help guide you, clear away the distractions, and that all revolves around the 1-page strategic plan. Okay, let's talk about that. So go ahead and take a look at this on your screen. You can read some of the sections here, but the 1-page strategic plan, as we call it, and up here's the title of it, it's a 3 to 5 year plan that combines strategic planning, strategic execution, and execution planning activities for your business. So once you've identified your short leg and factored in your barriers, you can start creating your 1-page strategic plan. So let me break that down just a little bit more. The core of the plan are parts of your business that will not change, such as your core values, your purpose, your company's purpose, and the core competencies of the company. Those are the core, those are the parts of your business that likely won't change. Even though as you change strategies, you change initiatives for, this year, next year, your core stays consistent. The second part of your 1-page strategic plan is what we call strategic thinking elements. And this identifies what you will focus on over the next 3 years, sometimes 3 to 5 years, but oftentimes 3 years is what we focus on. You would identify what financial targets you wish to hit and how you will draw upon your strengths, manage your weaknesses, and capitalize and identify and capitalize on trends in the marketplace. So that is more around strategic positioning. The third part of your plan is all about execution. And this identifies what you will focus on annually, quarterly, as well as individually. So all of that is on a nice one-page plan all together. And it's updated annually for annual initiatives, but you also meet monthly and quarterly to make sure you're on track with flawless execution of the plan. So the one-page strategic plan, and basically this is a list of a lot of those elements that you saw on the previous slide. But the one-page strategic plan is the place where you can focus on addressing your short leg, as well as the barriers to growth that may be limiting your organization's ability to scale. And the OPSP and information about each of these items can be found in this book called Scaling Up, written by Vern Harnish. And this book has won 8 major international book awards, including the International Book Award for Best General Business Book. So for those of you who want to get started on this right away, we recommend you get the book and skip to chapter 8 in the Scaling Up book. And that will give you a jump start on actually starting to implement this. Lastly, from our experience, it's helpful to have what we call a roadmap that also guides your leadership team, not just on how to create a plan or an OPSP, but also on how to execute it. And this is what you'll be receiving after the webinar. It's part of this PowerPoint deck, which will be sent to you. But each roadmap here is a little different, depending on what stage of growth your company is in and the foundations that you have already put in place. But on average, it takes 2 to 3 years to identify and execute on your roadmap. So what you're seeing here is an example of year 1. So let me talk to those companies on the line that would be interested in self-implementing this. On the left-hand side, you'll see a breakdown of elements of the one-page strategic plan, like core values, purpose, brand promise, one-year initiatives. Even Eileen had mentioned your BHAG, Big Hairy Audacious Goal, sandbox, etc. In addition, there are activities included in this roadmap that come from the Scaling Up book that I mentioned on the last slide from Vern Harnish. And these together, these are the activities that we recommend you focus on in your first year of implementing this. The right side of the roadmap is about adopting meeting cadences like monthly, this is monthly, quarterly, where 20% of your time should be focused on working on the business, not in the business. So these actually have the topics of what you would actually can learn about with your leadership team, report on, reinforce, and update it on your plan as according to your monthly, quarterly rhythms for the first year. So the OPSP is the place where you can focus on addressing your short leg as well as the barriers to growth that may be limiting your organization's ability to scale. And the roadmap is how you can walk through that on a monthly and quarterly basis. Okay. So let's recap. And in the last 35 minutes, we have covered the following. The first is the 4 critical decisions you will need to grow your business are strategy, people, execution, and cash. And we provided an assessment for how you can begin to identify your short leg. Second, we covered the 3 barriers to growth, which are leadership, having the right people in the right seats doing the right things, market dynamics, and scalable infrastructure. We also shared the 7 stages of growth model along with some scaling up case stories of other companies to help you navigate the barriers. And then finally, we introduced you to the 1-page strategic plan, plus a sample 1-year roadmap, which you can use as a guide to scaling. Okay, I'm going to hand the mic back to Cheryl Beth, who's going to review next steps and the resources that you will receive following this webinar. And she'll also open it up to questions and answers, Q&A. So, Cheryl Beth.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks. So as Jill said, we are going to be doing questions and answers. So just a reminder that if you haven't posted, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see Q&A box, and you can post your questions there. And we are allowing time at the end of the webinar to be able to make sure that you have all the information that you need in order to scale up. So from our standpoint, there are 3 possible follow-up options for those of you that are listening in, either right now or tomorrow when you get the recording, maybe a 4th. 1, as Jill already talked with you about, you can choose to self-implement. And there's a lot of resources to be able to do that. 2, you could decide, you know what, I think I need a little bit of help. I'm going to engage a scaling up coach. 3, for a group of you that really want to accelerate growth, you can choose to apply and attend our Scaling Up Masters program coming this fall. And 4th, you know what, you might have aced the assessment. You might be in really good shape, and you could choose to do nothing. And if that's the path you're going to take, we wish you the best of luck. And, you know, if you need to, just reach out to us later. But thanks for coming today. So let's talk about the first 3 options. To self-implement, get a hold of the Scaling Up book for yourself and your team, which you can also get on Audible, and go to the Scaling Up website, scalingup.com. Then download the growth tools, use the Scaling Up roadmap that you'll be getting in the PowerPoint presentation later today when we send out the email, along with these slides. That'll be a guide to you during your first year. And as Jill said, Chapter 8 is where you can jump ahead and dig right into filling out your 1-page strategic plan. 2, if you're interested in having a conversation about scaling up coaching and engaging a coach, you have a few options. You can go to the scalingup.com website, go underneath the coaching part, and find an actual Scaling Up coach that is geographically close to you. Or if you're in the United States, feel free to go to CEO Think Tank's website at ceothinktank.com and contact us directly. Finally, if you want to accelerate your growth and scale quickly this year, engage your team and have the opportunity to meet some of the thought leaders behind the Scaling Up operating system, we invite you to apply to the Scaling Up Masters program, which is launching in September in Philadelphia. A word of warning. This program is specifically geared towards companies that have a minimum top line revenue of 3 to 5 million with a leadership team in place. It is not for the faint-hearted. But this fast track program puts together decades of hands-on scaling up experience in the small and mid-market space, cutting edge business practices and tools, and participating CEOs and their teams will be equipped to drive top-line growth, alignment, and accountability. You'll also have the added opportunity to learn directly from small and mid-market thought leaders like Vern Harnish and Greg Crabtree, Karen Kopp, author of Biz Development Done Right, Kevin Daum, author of Roar, How to Get Heard in the Sales and the Marketing Jungle, as well as these other leaders that you can see on your screen. And you'll have the opportunity to connect with other enlightened leaders and their teams who are going to be scaling up with you. In addition, for those of you on our webinar today, we have a special offer to the first qualified 20 companies that apply to SMP. You will receive a complimentary cash flow analysis, which will help you to identify the 7 ways that you can improve your company's cash flow and increase your own capital for growth. So if you're ready to scale, go to CEO Think Tank's website, click on the events, and apply now. Again, we'll be sending out an email later today as well as tomorrow with the slides and the opportunity to connect. So please reach out. We'd like to answer questions. We're happy to have a conversation. Even if you want to try and self-implement, we're always ready to get on the phone and have a conversation with you. So it's been really a pleasure chatting with you today. I want to thank you very much on the behalf of myself and Eileen and Jill for joining us. We do have some time, and I'd like to open it up for questions.
Let's see.
No questions?
I'm looking. So again, if you'd like to ask a question, you can go to your Zoom controls and click on the Q&A, and we'd be happy to answer any of those questions.
No?
We must have done a really fantastic job of giving details. Terry, thank you for the question. Terry's question, how long does coaching last? Cheryl, Beth, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so really, Terry, it depends. Typically, it takes, as Jill said, a typical scaling up project can take 2 to 3 years, but initial engagements are someplace around 6 to 12 months. That will get you started along the path. That will help you to develop and begin to implement your one-page strategic plan. It will give you and your team access to the scaling up tools and other best practices that we've accumulated. And the Scaling Up Masters program is actually a 12-month program kicking off in September. So you can pretty much count on, I would say, 6 to 12 months.
Okay. Tom asks, would you recommend reading Scaling Up first before implementing the OPSP? And not sure what my colleagues would say, but I think they would agree. The answer is yes. I would absolutely recommend reading the book. I think we mentioned skipping right to chapter 8. We have a tendency to want to point people in the direction. It's not a book that you necessarily have to read from the first page to the last page, sort of jump around, but I would absolutely recommend reading it, at least that first chapter 8, if not the other first 2 chapters of the book before you start on the journey. William, he's asking, what size companies do you typically work with? Jill or Cheryl, Beth, you want to answer that?
I mean, we have worked with companies that are $1 to $2 million in revenue. Typically, you know, could be 5 to 10 people, all the way up to companies that are 250 million in revenue. That's the companies that we've, you know, that we enjoy working with. We feel like we can make an impact, although interestingly enough, myself as well as Eileen and Jill all came out of the Fortune 50. So we came out of the enterprise space before we decided we liked working with small companies better. But there are 175, perhaps 180 scaling up coaches that work with all size companies. So we're always really clear. We want you guys to get the best help, you folks to get the best help possible. And so if we're not the right scaling up group to work with, there's 180 other coaches out there that we can point you in the right direction.
I think Russell's question is really compelling. He's asking any thoughts around dealing with the coronavirus. And it's a question that Cheryl, Beth, Jill, and I were actually just talking about yesterday. And you know, the importance for any company, regardless if you think it may or may not affect you, should be huddling with your leadership team and unpacking that question. You know, how can it affect us either now or in the coming months, and really assess strategically what things you need to do now to be prepared if in fact it does touch your organization and negatively impact you know, your bottom line or your workflow. I don't know. Cheryl, Beth, or Jill, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I will jump in here and say, you know, if you think about it in terms of the 4 decisions of what we just went over today, you can kind of start asking key questions of your organization. So the first is, like, from a people standpoint, what positions are critical to have fully staffed versus ones that might be able to work remotely. I was just reading an article this morning talking about this might be the hugest mass experiment with telecommuting that we've seen. You can also ask questions around cash, like, and Cheryl, Beth, you could probably talk to this, but if you have 2 to 3 months of operating expenses, is that enough to weather maybe manufacturing downtime as a result of the virus? So I would say start applying the 4 decisions and seeing how you might be thinking about your organization critically to get through this in the short term. So Cheryl, Beth, anything else?
Yeah, just spending some time with your top team, having a conversation about supply chain. And again, sometimes the supply chain that you have may not be completely obvious. You know, we've had clients that have actually had their manufacturing operations shut down in China for over a month. So they certainly had that issue, but other companies that you may not think had suppliers, or even a trucking company, a trucking and logistics company that we deal with. Having those types of conversations and saying, what if, asking yourself, what if Vern Harnish, I love Vern Harnish. He always says, sometimes it's not having the answers, it's about asking the right questions. So really spending some strategic think time around that would be useful.
William, perhaps Cheryl, Beth addressed your question was what's too large or too small, and I believe that that's in relationship to the size of the organization. So I believe we've addressed that. Hopefully, if we haven't, please comment. Terry is asking, how often do you talk with a coach? Is it monthly or weekly? Let me take that one first. And then, so for many of our clients, the way we structure our engagements is that we are meeting with the senior leadership team on a monthly basis. And in between those monthly on-sites, whether they're a half day or a full day, it depends, we're engaging one-on-one with the CEO, often between 30 and 60 minutes in between or as needed between those monthly meetings. So we're physically with the leadership team on a monthly basis. and in between working with the CEO and perhaps somebody else on their leadership team if they're stuck or need some additional support.
Right, and I will say at the beginning of an engagement, typically there's a 1 to 2 day kickoff meeting where it's for the leadership team, and the purpose of that is to learn about scaling up the one-page strategic plan and basically get alignment across your leadership team on this new operating system. And so that's a first key step. And then it goes into monthly meetings and then also quarterly meetings where you reflect on the previous quarter's successes and challenges and then change what your focus is for the next quarter potentially. So.
And just to segue into Tom's question about the structure and the framework, is the coaching virtual? From our perspective, our coaching is generally in person, face to face. Those one-on-ones with our CEOs, those are frequently phone calls or Zoom calls. But the monthly meeting rhythm is face to face. I've had clients that have had remote teams. So while there's a core team at headquarters, their leadership team might be spread across different states across the country. And in those situations, we huddle up at where the majority of the leadership team resides, and then we Zoom in the other leaders, and hopefully along that journey, either on a quarterly or annual basis, the other leaders that are remote, that are dialing in via video, are able to come join us for a quarterly meeting or an annual meeting.
Yep. They're great questions.
Yeah, great questions. I think I'm just sort of looking over at the chat box. There was a question here. Diane asks, what is cost of coaching? That's a depends question. It really depends on a couple of variables, one meaning, we're very results outcome focused. So it's important for us to understand from the CEO what results, you're striving to achieve through implementing this, operating system or methodology of scaling up, what the cadence of meeting rhythms, what time and invested or time availability you have to invest in that meeting cadence. So there's some variables that go in. It's not an easy answer, but I will say that there's a range of engagements that can go from, annually, we'll talk annually, somewhere between $50,000 and $70,000. It just really depends on the scope of the engagement.
So it looks like we have another question back on the Q&A from Brandon. If a company's biggest issue is cash, how would you go about handling that without putting the company in danger financially? So that's a great question. I'll start off first, and then Eileen and Cheryl, Beth, you want to jump in. But one of the first things we do when working with companies is we do a cash flow analysis. And what that analysis is a look back over at least 3 periods. They might be years or quarters, but typically over the past 3 years. And we analyze it. And there are 7 different levers or ways that you can improve your cash flow. And so what we do is look at that. We have a report that we would actually give you and identify what are those areas that you could change that would materially impact your cash flow without putting, in your words, the company in danger. And the trick with that is asking the right questions, right? It's not always just about getting to the answer, but there are some things specifically with cash that you might change. You know, maybe it's volume, maybe it's price, maybe it's cutting your costs, maybe it's getting your receivables in a day or 5 days sooner. You know, there's different things that you can do to actually speed up your cash. And you might have to make one or multiple changes in order to improve that. So there's a way that within that tool that we use that we could actually run scenarios to see what the impact on cash would be. But we have to factor in, where are you headed as a business? What strategic goals do you have? What's your growth targets? I mean, there's a lot that goes into that besides just, you know, trying to come up with numbers. So Eileen or Cheryl, Beth, you have anything to add there?
Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
All right, great. So I would also add that that's one of the reasons that we've partnered with Mike and Greg and the folks on Crabtree's team, is because about a third of the companies that we work with have issues in that area. And so having the right financial partners, you know, we're very, very clear that we do not have all the answers. And it's one of the reasons that we appreciate having folks like Mike and Greg on our team, and Veronica and Brandon and all those folks, is because they can help us to navigate the cash questions.
Right.
There's also a question about coaching one-on-one over the internet from Terry. Yes, we certainly will do that. We work with companies, you know, using Zoom to work remotely. We've worked with companies in Florida and California as well. So if it's something that you want to explore, reach out. We'd be happy to chat with you. And when Eileen was talking earlier about working remotely, so Uniflight, the helicopter company you all saw, we actually did that with them. They had 3 different locations, and so we ended up having, they use Google Hangouts for their quarterly and monthly meetings. So it can be done. The technology is available to us, which is great now. There's one more question, right?
There's a couple more questions, yeah. One on cash flow. Cash flow may be stronger than statements demonstrate due to shareholder transactions. Yeah. How do you naturalize your cash flow analysis to account for undefined or unplanned shareholder draws?
What would Greg Crabtree say?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to cash, again, for me, and that's what I was saying, it all goes back to the questions that you ask. And so one question would be around this is, you know, what was the reason for the undefined, unplanned shareholder draws? What is happening in the company? Is this a one-off? Is this like, I would have multiple questions to even begin to understand how to actually naturalize the cash flow analysis around that. And an answer or another question might be, well, what does your financial advisor say about that? So to me, I think I would have many more questions around that than answers right out of the gate. It's a good question.
So we've got about 2 minutes left and one question, and then we need to hand it back to Mike. Tom, what are the basic differences between the Philly meeting versus coaching? Are there different outcomes? Should one be considered over the other depending on need? Jill or Eileen, you wanna take that one?
Sure. So the reference, the Philly meeting is the Scaling Up Masters program versus one-on-one companies. So I'll take it from the point of the Masters program. This is a cohort of 5 companies that will be going through the 12-month program together. It's very accelerated. If you remember, Jill mentioned earlier in the webinar that implementing Scaling Up typically takes between 2 and 3 years. The Scaling Up Masters program is a very accelerated, intensive program that you'll do with, 5 companies, but much faster than if we were working one-on-one with you as a scaling up direct client, where in all likelihood we'll begin with the 1-year engagement, but the velocity of us going through the methodology and the material and working through the plan. Jill, I'll quote Jill, she says the first year is really about getting the plan together. The second year is about using the plan and working the plan inside your company. And the third year is where you get your stride. The Scaling Up Masters program is the intention is to get you to get your stride within 12 months. So it's very intensive. Depends on the time that you have, the availability and the mind share that you can dedicate to attending the 2-day kickoff in the program, and then the quarterly meetings, full day meetings, a day and a half for the CEOs.
Mm-hmm. And if you're considering an accelerated approach, you know, again, we do have a special offer to the first 20 of you who apply for the program, and we have a conversation about it. Jill and Eileen and I are very open to talking with folks and making sure that you get on the right track based on what your end game really is and what you're trying to do with yourself and your team and your companies. So thank you, Tom, for bringing that up. I think we're at 101. Mike, should we be handing this back to you at this point?
Yeah. I mean, now it's time to go. Everyone go eat lunch and have a great rest of your day. Thank you, Cheryl, Beth, and your team for a great presentation. Just a reminder to everyone, said many times, we'll be sending out a recap email with recording, slides, and all kinds of good information for you to take advantage of. So in addition to this, you have any questions, feel free to hit us up, email, LinkedIn, all the good ways to contact us. So everyone have a great rest of your day, and appreciate to our panelists for a great webinar. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.